Now, Dre, you mentioned that you're not able to come because you're out of state.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what you and George think about that, the implementation of that whole process. Like how is Disney going to kind of enforce that whole situation?
According to the guidelines issued by the state, they say that the way they're going to do it on their end, it comes with the expectation that there will be kind of an enforcement to this. But the way they mention it in the guidelines is that they will bring out whatever reservation or ticketing buying process exists in advance. Hopefully, it's all online. The guest purchasing those tickets understands that I believe they're purchasing tickets with households of no more than three, and no more than I think like 10 guests or something like that.
Wow.
And the way they're doing it is kind of it's an attestation, kind of on your honor. Hey, look, click the checkbox. That you know that those qualifiers in advance, right? And then when you actually go to the actual parks themselves, from what I understand, this is Dave from Fresh Bakes reporting on this. He's saying that he has done pretty good authority that they are going to be checking IDs at the gates, and that's pretty profound because you have people who can't get access to IDs, children and others. And
Right.
how do you confirm they're authentic? Is ID the only way you can actually get in? Is there any other proof? Maybe bills or so forth? I mean, it becomes a mess. But from what I understand, from what Dave is saying, they are going to be enforcing this.
Wow. I would assume children would probably be left. I would assume they probably would make a threshold. Maybe I would guess 16 and under maybe don't have to, but then that leads. Yeah, but then that leads to like people coming in, like kids from out of state, like. That's interesting. What do you think?
Maybe if I shave my beard and walk on my knees, OrangeGrove, I could pass off as your young.
See, George, there you go. How do you verify age? How do you actually confirm that somebody's 16 or younger? I mean, this is getting really hairy.
And this is the honest to God truth. I actually had a full mustache at the age 11. I went into middle school. They thought I was a substitute teacher. Wow. It's honestly to the notion of what if, just to say, I mean, I guess that could be like out of the left field, but I'm just saying that if someone did say, this is my 11-year-old son, and they happen to see a little stash grow in there, I mean, are you then going to have to accuse the person of saying, no, you're infiltrating as an 11-year-old, but they're really an 11-year-old? Do you have to then bring birth certificates?
Oh my goodness. This gets so awkward so quickly. And then, how is that process going to go when you're trying to get into the parks themselves? I'm guessing they're going to have reduced hours, and this might take a long time, even at a reduced 15 or 25% capacity. This is going to be really tough. I still don't know how this process is going to go. It's interesting. Universal just announced, and we can get into that if you guys want to. Universal announced on April 16th that they were opening. So it'll be interesting to see what do they do and what Disney might do or change.
That is true, because it honestly seems like, and I was actually surprised because I just saw that today, that with Universal Hollywood opening, and their date is sooner than Disney. So that's telling me that they already have a system that they already have in their mind that's going to be played out. So I wonder if Disney is then going to kind of copycat that notion, or if they have a whole other system of their own. Now, to your question, OrangeGrove, for me, being, again, out of state, and not even just out of state, I'm on the whole other side of the United States. So anytime that I could then visit Disneyland was always a privilege, because I'm so much, it's an easier access to go to Walt Disney World. But now they're going to have to work out all the bugs and the kinks just with the locals alone, with you guys. And then if however long that's going to take, then they're going to start implementing, out-of-towners or, out-of-state people. But then it also makes me question to the fact of that, when doing the park reservation system, when that is implemented, that when I stay at Walt Disney World, it allots me that the time when you're staying on property at a Disney hotel, that's the amount of time that you could actually have a reserve pass, which is fairly easy. Now, as we were talking about with like the vloggers who are Florida locals and what have you, they're only allotted 3 days per their time slot. So
Right.
does that mean then if I'm not staying at a Disneyland hotel, which they're very expensive, I usually stay at a Good Neighbor hotel, that will they then incorporate that notion that if you're staying at a Good Neighbor hotel, the length amount of time that you're there, that's when you could have your theme park passes, because if not, then I'm forced to stay on property. So I know that I'm guaranteed theme park time flying cross country.
Yeah.
Oh man, this gets really tricky really fast. Go ahead, Orange Grove.
No, yeah, I was just say that's the issue with this reservation system, is that it creates like you're having to like do like dual reservations and line them up. You know, it becomes a real issue.
Because I understand it for Walt Disney World, but every time that I try to sit down and literally break it down, I just can't see it for Disneyland.
Yeah.
It becomes really, really tricky, and I think that's why they're not debuting a annual pass holder system replacement yet. It just gets really, really complicated. I think the way they're going to do it at Disneyland is, depending on the tickets you buy, that's how many reservations that you get, and that's pretty straightforward. Later on, though, it's going to be really tricky, and the way that the Disneyland Resort gets its visitation, the way it's used by guests in the area, I mean, it's far different, far more complex than Walt Disney World, and they go with such regular frequency that you're going to have flexibility in that system. I don't know if they'll implement a system where you have to stay on hotel property to get access to more days. I don't think they're going to do that necessarily like they do in Walt Disney World. They just don't have the inventory to have a system like that. But I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
it'll definitely be interesting. I'm just curious to see. I'm going to be sitting here like with a bag of chips and a soda, just like watching California like on April 30th, of literally to see how this is all going to pan out. Because
I mean that
it's. I would hate to have to travel down Harbor Boulevard or West Catella Avenue like during that time of reopening, because I just think, especially with the physical distancing and everything, that line is probably going to be overwhelming, to say the least.
Well, wouldn't it be funny though? Because remember, like all the conversations leading up to the opening of Galaxy's Edge, we were all talking about like this is gonna be Armageddon. Everyone's gonna try to come, and then it opens and it's like just crickets, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if that's what happens here? Like everyone's expecting it to be packed, and there's nobody.
well, hang on there, Orange Grove. When Rise of Resistance opened, I can personally attest that place was bonkers.
It was bonkers
at opening. Every single day, that place was wild. I can. There's some stories to tell you on that one for sure. But I think they will get demand, and what people have been speculating is, are they going to have windows to when you can arrive when you actually do get your reservation? Now, this is kind of interesting because, again, you're paying for a day, right? You're paying for, let's say it's going to be on a Thursday. They're open from 8 to 8. That's 12 hours or whatever. You're paying for those 12 hours. If they have windowed arrival times, well, that takes away from the time that you actually paid for. So how does that work?
Right.
Conceivably, that's the only way I can actually think of overcoming some of those issues. But again, you do have that problem where people paid full price to actually get Disneyland for that period amount of time. You could have a system where, okay, well, because you have a late windowed arrival time, that many hours is subtracted from your ticket in terms of cost. That would be fair, but again, it's just, this gets really tricky really fast.
It does. George, because I'm not familiar with the Walt Disney World system at all. So when you stay on property at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, let's say you're there Monday through Friday, right?
Right.
And you reserve all those days at, say, the Grand Floridian. Now, do you automatically get park reservations because you're staying at the hotel, or is there a chance they can deny you?
Well, here's how it goes. You're not necessarily guaranteed, but it gives you a higher percentage of a chance to get them. Whereas, like that, if you are in a sense of, for just to say October 1st, for Walt Disney World's 50th, that whether you're at a hotel or not, you better reserve a pass for that. Otherwise, it's going to fill up. But just let's just say it's not like a special occasion, just on any given day, as you said, Monday through Friday. Like as of right now, like in our July trip, we're going to be there for 2 weeks. We are staying on property at Pop Century. So very sorry.
Bless you.
It's all right.
Just broke the sound barrier. So that for staying for 2 weeks at Pop Century, that we were literally not necessarily guaranteed, but it was very simple. It's a much easier transition of going along, that when you book your hotel, then you could just choose your days and then you pick which park you want to go to on that day. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Cool.
But now if we were staying off property and we didn't have a hotel reservation, then it would only allot us where if we, like, it would be different for me because I have an annual pass, but for my wife and son, which, speaking of my wife, she's the one that probably just echoed up into Mars, but that they don't have annual passes because unfortunately everything shut down before I was able to get their passes. So they just have a 10-day base ticket. If we were going to stay off property, when I have an annual pass, it would be much more easier for me to get the annual passes. But for them having a 10-day ticket, we would then have to see what the block-out dates for that particular tier of ticket. So
Wow.
that's where it would get more complicated.
Yeah.
It gets even more complicated because resort hotel guests kind of get first dibs. Like you know how they separate standby line to fast pass, and you only have a set amount of capacity that can be allowed per attraction per hour, but they divvy it up. I think the ratio is like 60% max pass, fast pass, 40% standby. It's sort of like that with the reservation system. So for hotel guests, they have their own pool to which to actually nab park reservations for, separate from general admission or annual passes. So it gets even trickier than that.
Yeah,
It's
Mhm.
crazy.
yeah, that's exactly as what Dre was saying. It's literally different tiers of that. If you have a park ticket, you're on your own if you're not staying on property. If you have an annual pass but you're not staying on property, you're on your own. Then you could be an annual pass holder and have tickets, but if you're staying at a hotel, you have your own tier. So it's like, so this is where it's going to get very interesting with Disneyland, because a lot of people, especially with locals, they'll just take the car ride, drive there, go in, come back, that's going to be very interesting because I know a lot of people just like to go in, get some pictures, maybe get a snack, a drink, sit down on a bench and leave. Where
Right.
when that takes up a block for someone to say, hey, I want to be there for the full day from morning to night, are they now going to have, as Dre, I think you said, like different time slots of when you could arrive, and you have
Yep.
that amount of time to say, hey, you could stay in this park for an amount of time. But
Yep.
then, like, I don't know how that would work.
It gets really, really tricky. From what I understand, the system at Disneyland might be a little bit more nuanced than Walt Disney World, where you might have like maybe reservation windows that open up after a certain amount of time. Like, I know a lot of people get off work, they go down there and use the park like that. I know they know about that, obviously, so maybe reservations open up at like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. so that people could still do that. It just gets really tricky. And I know a lot of the annual passes that they were looking at implementing or were surveying guests on quite a few months ago included items like that. Included items like how many reservations that you get access to based on your type of tier pass and so forth. I know some people at Walt Disney World, literally they have, their annual pass holders, so they only have 3. As soon as they walk in the gates, as soon as they scan their magic band or whatever, they go out and get a reservation at that minute to be able to utilize their queue more efficiently.
Now, actually, with kind of piggybacking on to with Disneyland Forever, this would actually help in a sense where in time, because I know that they said that they're going to try to start possibly the process in 2023, but the whole process of this could be 10 to 20 years to actually finalize to get everything done. So, I mean, depending on where we stand as far as like Disneyland coming out of the gate, as far as like with capacity and crowd control and everything, this would definitely enable them to now kind of, depending on when this process would start opening and take place, to add in a higher capacity of people, because then they would have a whole nother area, a whole nother section for them to place people, because right now it's just the 2 parks, the hotels, and Downtown Disney. Right. So it just makes me question, like, depending on how long this would take of the process, like how long of a time would it's starting off at 15%, correct? Like how long the 15% would last?
I believe they just officially got into Orange tier in Orange County. So they are able to go up to 25% at the gate if they want to. Go ahead, Orange Grove.
Oh, no, I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, they just hit Orange tier, so 25% when they open. It is no longer applicable unless we get a major surge between now and then, but I'm assuming not.
Good, cool. Now,
yeah.
Also on the Disneyland Forward, we were talking about the attractions and like possibly like what they showed on the website, and it's pretty much not a guarantee, but they kind of give an idea of like with Frozen and Tangled and Neverland and what have you, that it would be to Disney's best interest to then create something that they're already creating from another park, because it's cost saving, and right now Disney needs to consume as much as they can, but also bring back more of revenue. That do you think that, I mean, even till then, from now, things can change in a click of a finger with new streaming with Disney Plus, more shows, more movies coming out, theaters reopening, anything could change at any time. But is it safe to say that you guys think that more so Frozen, Tangled, Neverland would be the ideal way to go for Disney as far as if they were to implement new attractions in this area?
Well, I think, and Dre, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe because some of the stuff they showed on that website was lifted from Tokyo, and I believe there's a clause in there somewhere with Tokyo Disney where their attractions can't be cloned for a certain amount of time. Have you heard that, Dre? Where
I've heard it's like 5 years, and I've heard
5 years.
Yeah, I've heard, because Oriental Land Company, how they go through Imagineering for that. They want a certain time of exclusivity, and I've heard it's also for other international parks. But I've heard, as far as that goes, like 5 years. I don't know which parks that applies to, but yeah.
Now, by the time that this would all be said and done, and
5 years anyway,
open, it would probably be covered anyway. Because I think that's pretty much a daunting task. That if that is the case with Tokyo, but for them to still put that to incorporate, because I have heard before they announced Disneyland, I almost said Disneyland Forever, that Disneyland Forward, that they had said that they did a guest survey, and they said that a lot of people wanted more Tangled in the parks. I don't know if you guys saw that article for the survey, but they said, and I think this actually came from Chapek himself. He said a lot of people wanted Tangled more than anything incorporated into the parks, and now seeing with Disneyland Forward, and now we're getting a little bit of a concept art possibly that Tangled could actually be included in this area.
Well, and then the interesting thing about the themes that they chose for Disneyland in this Disneyland Forward announcement was that it's very fairy tale based, right? You had Peter Pan, Tangled, and Frozen, which kind of makes me think like what kind of, if the land is actually going to be in that expansion pad across the street, what's going to be the land? Because they already have fantasy land. So what would this new land be where it could also incorporate these fairy tales? It'd be kind of interesting because they don't want to be too redundant either, right?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, because they already have like the fantasy land, the Tomorrowland, so it's like if it were to connect off of, but being that fantasy land is already sort of center into the park, there's no way that they can make that bridge over. I'm assuming where the bridge would be
Critter
Country, but that could also help in a sense too, because with Splash Mountain becoming Princess and the Frog, you're already kind of integrating that fairy tale type of notion, But as you mentioned, Orange Grove, that we never thought that Galaxy's Edge would fit into Disneyland like that, but they find a way to find it in there. But I also find it interesting that when you look at the Neverland portion, and people are saying, well, we already have Peter Pan's flight in Fantasyland. But in time, you could always rechange Peter Pan's flight. I may be in the minority here, but what if they were to take the area as far as like where the motorboats was and actually where the submarine voyage, that would be perfect for Skull Rock.
Oh, yeah.
And they could do like a whole area there, and that could expand upon Fantasyland as well.
The Tangled and Neverland, those kind of fantasy concepts came from Tokyo Disney Sea's expansion. So literally, they're putting those items in the second gate over there at the Tokyo Disney Resort. So in a way, they would be, they would have the same problems, thematic consistency wise, as they have with Tokyo Disney Sea as opposed to Tokyo Disneyland, as we do with Disneyland Park and Disney California Adventure. So you could, I could envision, a concept where they have fantasy type attractions in DCA as part of that expansion, in kind of a similar way they do with Little Mermaid right now, and make it all cohesive and work. And maybe that degree of separation will assist in that. I do agree that the fantasy concepts do sound best if implemented north of the submarine voyage attraction, the load station. I believe those concepts would fit best there. From what I understand, some of those concepts have been kind of toyed with to be placed in those positions. Like I said earlier, Beast Castle was kind of toyed with being in Fantasyland proper or along Small World Mall area. I've heard Frozen being implemented in the area where the Fantasyland Theater currently resides, and heading up north in an area between Toontown and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge as it exists today. I would think that they would go with the best thematic elements for those additions, but honestly, there's nothing stopping them from doing whatever, wherever.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, absolutely.
And even with Frozen, even before Disneyland Forward, that was already sort of a rumor going around that eventually Frozen was going to make its way to Disneyland at some point or another. And Orange Grove, I know you mentioned it several times on your channel, that with the type of ride system that they were making overseas in the Frozen Land, it's basically just the ride vehicle system of the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train at Walt Disney World. Right. So with them already having that ride system already patented, and all they would have to do is just re-theme it, reskin it, or what have you, that would be an easy way to, again, it's cheaply, I don't want to say cheaply made, but it's like it cuts costs, but they could also bring something back. And also with the Neverland section, that if they were to do an updated version of Peter Pan, if they were to eventually change Peter Pan's flight, and me just saying that now, I'm probably getting a flood of emails right now saying, how dare you? But
hashtag cancel George.
Oh no! Oh boy! I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, no joking.
That they could eventually use the type of ride system for Flight of Passage in Pandora and create a new type of way of a Peter Pan's flight.
Yeah,
I've heard the Peter Pan attraction that's going in at Tokyo Disney Seas is kind of a version 2 of that. It's from what I understand, it's quite a stellar experience. It really is quite something. Complete next gen, something we really have never seen before, and that would be the closest that it would be to that. I mean, look, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge exists with Star Tours in place, right? I mean, these things, I think they can cohabitate spaces. I don't believe that things have to be necessarily, just, it has to be part of that section. No, I think these things can coexist.
Yeah. And Peter Pan is such, I mean, there's so much potential there with that property. It's almost kind of like, and again, now I might get canceled. It almost kind of makes sense to get rid of Peter Pan's flight because it is very 1950s technology with all the new technology available to them at their fingertips to really create an immersive flight experience comparative to like basically just that little ride system they have currently with Peter Pan flight. I mean, it makes sense. It really does. That property really lends itself to some new technology, and it could be breathtaking. And I'm certain Tokyo Disney is going to hit it out of the park,
Now, as far as like with Disney California Adventure, like actually like on that website where it shows the portion that with Disney California Adventure, it shows Zootopia, Tron, and Toy Story Land. Now, I want to ask you guys this because my co-host of the Grand Circle Tour podcast, Jungle Skipper Jay, brought up an interesting point that to incorporate Toy Story Land, Tron, or Zootopia into DCA, that would initially take off the whole California theme, so to speak. So now my question to you is, could this potentially be like how they did with Hollywood Studios in Florida, where instead of doing a behind-the-scenes type of working studio that it puts you in the act, puts you in the story, and they kind of drop the California logo, so to speak, and it just becomes a Disney adventure park?
I actually disagree with him on that, though, because I do think now this is all the caveat is, will Disney do this? I don't know. But there are creative ways to incorporate these properties into the California theme. I mean, Zootopia, you can make a Zootopia-tized San Francisco. It's, the animal version of a San Francisco, which would tie in beautifully with the California Adventure, or even Tron. You could make a whole district on Silicon Valley, which would be technology based. When Tron is based inside a computer, you could do that. There are creative ways to do that. Now, here's the huge caveat. Like I said, will Disney take it that far just to maintain that California relevancy? I don't know, but I mean, there are ways to do it. Definitely.
And it made me question it too, because like after looking at the website and they specified those three, in particular, possibly, again, these are just ideas that could go into DCA, not saying that they will, but I think it's kind of interesting that they chose those three ideas to potentially be put in DCA. So I wasn't sure if they were to keep the California theme and just say, hey, this is an adventure in California, this is all the experiences you can have, or if it's going to be based off of California theming.
What do you think, Andre? Like, I mean, do you think that it would kind of ditch the California theme, or would they kind of try to incorporate it? Nice background.
I know.
Timing.
Yeah. So I think, look, you can integrate it quite nicely. I mean, look at Avengers Campus, right? It doesn't fully 100% play into California culture, but it is of the aesthetic. It is a little bit to do with car culture with the Tony Stark implementation there. They can do it in a way that doesn't scream California, but still has Californian elements. I mean, the cityscape, as mentioned, as seen in Zootopia, is it's amalgam of animal and kind of human societies, right? You can model that off of California landmarks in LA. You can make that imagery evoke certain imagery that you would expect to find in like I said, the very urban areas like San Francisco or Los Angeles. So I think you can be really creative with it. I don't think it must necessarily 100% must take on California, but I also think it doesn't have to be displaced 100% either. I think you can kind of find a middle ground that still evokes California in some way, but doesn't scream it like 2001 DCA did.
Yeah, and California Adventure since 2012 has really kind of shifted. It's still a California park. All the areas are still very reminiscent of California, whether it be Cars Land and Route 66 or, Buena Vista Street, which is, LA. They're still California, but they're just kind of seen through that Disney lens. So it's got that Disney. It's not a literal approach when it comes to California. It's more of a Disneyized version of the state. So like Dre was saying, I think that Zootopia concept would be really cool. And even like Tron, things like that. I think it would work. You don't need it to have too much California to really make it believable,
Yeah, to make it fit. And I think your Silicon Valley concept is really quite profound. And I had never really considered that before. From what I have seen, from what I've heard, Tron might be in Tomorrowland, but hey, look, nothing to say it can't work in California Adventure if executed properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It'd be kind of cool. It'd be kind of cool. That's interesting. That threw me for a loop because like we've all kind of assumed, Tron Tomorrowland, no brainer. Yeah. And then they do that, and it's like, what? It's kind of how I felt when they announced Batuu. Like, I did not see that coming a mile away. I was like, wow, that's interesting placement, but okay, and it worked.
Well, yeah, and, it's kind of interesting you say that just to bring back kind of some history. When Pandora was originally going to be, thought up as a concept as part of Walt Disney Imagineering. First, a lot of people thought, okay, it belongs in the studios. It's got to go in the studios. It's got to go in the studios. But I think it was Tom Staggs who said, no, this really belongs in Animal Kingdom. There is a kind of conservation message here that can be brought to the forward in Animal Kingdom, and kind of threw the Imagineers for a little bit of a loop. And as we've seen, that was the best decision probably that was made for that concept.
Oh yeah,
so you just never know.
You never know. Yeah, Pandora going into Animal Kingdom is great. It was beautifully handled, like you said, the conservation message, and it completely fits the what do you call it? The mission statement, so to speak, of the park. I mean, it kind of all those,
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to deal with the fantastical, right, or the mythical, and the modern myth would be something like Avatar. I mean, that's literally our kind of modern myths that we tell to each other nowadays. So I think it does fit within that quite well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to come out. As I said, I don't see this as a project that's going to be done in the way that Disney makes one attraction, which apparently takes 12 years. So, so I'm going to guess that it's going to be probably a 10-plus year journey. That's what I'm going to call it. It's going to be a 10-plus journey to not even just make a concept, build it, get it open, but now having to work with the city council and getting them on their side to say, hey, in the words, I can't believe I'm quoting this, of a High School Musical, we're all in this together. So it's like just
hey, you know what? That was a great show. I can't wait for season 2. I'll be honest with you. I enjoyed that show.
Definitely. So before we go, I just have one last quick question for you guys. If you could actually, Orange Grove, if you could bring up the Disneyland Forward real quick.
Oh yeah.
The last part, we covered the main section, but there was also another section. It's like right there that for, I guess that's going to be like an extension, like for a possible dining, shopping, entertainment type of venue, where that's where I was kind of getting a little bit confused on, because if they integrate more of dining, shopping, entertaining with that main section that's going to be expanded. So what would this potentially be? Are they just saying that it could go both ways, or is this going to be added with the expansion itself?
Well, from what I understand, this is part of the expansion. I mean, I don't know the timeline as to like, I mean, I don't think they're going to all open at once, but I mean, this is part of what they want to do with this overall expansion. And this occur, I mean, according to the art, would be something like akin to like a Disney Springs with like a hotel. It would almost kind of be like its own little separate resort, you know, which in concept, I actually really like that idea. And I talked to Dre about this. I just don't love where they're putting it because I would like to see a third park on that lot. But yeah, it's a cool concept though.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the one element where the city could actually, I could kind of see them saying, "Hey, look, no, this was a plot of land that was reserved for a third gate, and really it should stay that way."
Now, do you think with this being, just all, hypothetical, that it still could potentially become a third gate?
I would say it has the best chance to be right now. I mean, I've debated this quite heavily, both internal and externally with others, and the best I can muster is that I do peg the chances of it being a third gate slightly higher than I do a kind of standalone hotel and resort complex. I really can't see that, and honestly, that really opens up the possibility. Well, if you do that there, what about the garden walk? To join all these things together, what happens there? You could have a scenario where you could have the garden walk be almost a kind of complement to downtown Disney. Have a corridor there, and it kind of brings all that together along with the Eastern Gateway project up north. So there are many ways you can go about it. I think you leverage more of it by way of a theme park than you do standalone resort hotel complex.
Yeah, and I was talking to Dre about this on my channel the other day. That Toy Story parking lot area is laid out in a way. Well, it's about the same acreage as California Adventure. It's like 74 or 75 acres. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to find another piece of property close enough to the resort like that. You're not going to find 75 acres anywhere else. So if I mean, they're going to have to, if they really want a third park, this is really where they're going to have to really put it. Now it just depends, how serious is Disney about putting in a third park? I think it's kind of like, I think they want to do it. I don't know. I don't think it's like urgent. Like, I don't think they want to get it done in a few years or anything like that. But I do think eventually that's the goal. So I agree with Dre. I think that this is ultimately going to be a third park. The concept art really doesn't mean much. It's for zoning, and they're trying to just get as much flexibility as they can. Now, Dre, you would know, is this area zoned for theme parks already?
It is. So the EIR report specifically states that it is zoned for theme parks currently, and they actually had to get a special approval to make it a parking lot at all.
So that makes me wonder why they just wouldn't put those attractions in there to begin with, rather than. But I guess they want it to be unless they would still add on for Disneyland and DCA, but then still have a third park where maybe potentially that's where Tron and Toy Story Land and Zootopia can go.
And it also could be the possibility, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but they're kind of keeping their cards close to their chest. Maybe Disney feels putting the third park in this concept will scare the city away a little bit. Maybe Disney just wants to kind of play things safe a little bit, so they approve it, and then once they have their approval, then they can do what they want to do. But because a third park is going to stir up the neighborhood.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure. Oh yeah.
And absolutely. That's pretty much what this whole concept and website is about, where I think a lot of people were misinterpreting that, this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to be. This is just to get the city of Anaheim and the council approval and everyone be on the same page to say, yeah, go ahead. We're giving Disney the green light to go ahead and do this.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's been earmarked. None of these concepts have been approved for any part of the Disneyland Resort, whether it featured in the concept or not. I think the most likely scenario, and then I guess we'll wrap this up here. The most likely scenario, as far as I can tell, is an expansion of Disney California Adventure going across Disneyland Drive as it is depicted in the concept artwork. I can see Downtown Disney being extended, and if any of these plots of land are taken up, a parking structure for Downtown Disney to make up for that lost parking of the symbol lot and so forth. Eastern Gateway for sure. I mean, really, before you touch any of these plots, Eastern Gateway must, a parking structure on that side has to come up out of the ground. There's just no getting around it. They just don't have the parking inventory to lose at this point. And I think long term, maybe an expansion of Disneyland on that side and a third gate.
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Well, again, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. We had a lengthy conversation. I'm glad we had it. There was a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about, a lot to hash out and everything. And VashSky, I want to thank you for joining us on my channel, first time ever. I definitely would love to have you back on. And
absolutely, please.
And if you want to remind everyone where they could find you.
Best place to find me is on Twitter. That's VashSky. That's V as in Victor. ASHSKY. I think you can see it in the corner right there. So just put a little @ sign in front of it, and that's the best way to find me. And like I said, I might be producing some content for OrangeGrove's channel, so keep an lookout for that.
Definitely.
Awesome. And Orange Grove, again, as always, thanks for coming on my channel again. It's great to have you on here, and let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, thank you for having me. And you can find me on YouTube, OrangeGrove55. I do videos once or twice a week, and always about the parks or like the streaming service or the films, all of it, all the time.
Well, on that note, everyone, thank you for joining us. And remember, stay healthy, stay safe, stay Disney. Bye, everybody.